Well, ho, 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 and welcome to Happy Times and Places, which is a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, get a friend to choose a Doctor Who story, nominate their favourite things about it, then I have to watch, commentate along, and try to guess what those favourite things are.
Right, hi Toby, and listeners. My name is Ben Pope. I'm a stand-up comedian and writer. And Toby's very kindly asked me to choose my favourite episode, which is the Christmas Invasion. Which the reason I've chosen this is I have an incredible amount of emotional stock tied up in this episode. It's the first ever episode of Who that I ever saw, and I remember it so vividly, being 12 or 13 and seeing the trailer for it on the BBC in the Christmas run-up, and all this like action and adventure, and the like indelible image of the sonic wave that blows up all of the London landmarks. And I'd never seen anything like it, and I hadn't seen sci-fi for my age group, and I was so excited, and I watched it, and then literally watching it again for this, I have written down so many things that I like. It is like an embarrassment of riches. My favourite things for this episode. I wrote down 10, and I know I'm only allowed 5.
Well, welcome everybody. I don't know when you are listening to this. That's the nature of modern things. I was talking to one of my children the other day, and the idea that they should watch anything when anybody else decides, the idea of schedules, was completely alien to them. And so I'm trying to get relaxed about the idea that the reason I am about to do, as you heard from the delightful Ben Pope there, the Christmas Invasion, is because for me, it's nearly Christmas. Now I've got work to do. I've got a script to get in. I've got an obituary to write. And I was supposed to be filming something on Monday. I'm not now. So now I've got that hanging over me, and I'm stuck with a facial hair arrangement that was a temporary experiment that coincided with an audition and was supposed to then be sort of dispensed with after the filming, but the filming is now hung over till after Christmas. Timetabling has gone to pot. I was also supposed to have a nodule removed from my face, which can't now go because I'm within continuity. So I've had to mess all sorts of people about. But I mean, that sounds like a ramble, but it's apposite to the time of year. I'm at Christmas, and also the fact that I'm feeling slightly that, the spectrumy part of me goes, well, if I'm doing it at Christmas, it should go out at Christmas. But of course, I have two audiences. I have the Patreon audience, who get the stuff a lot sooner than the non-Patreon audience, and I make no apology for that. I've had to, during the pandemic, these podcasts were dreamed up as a way to, one, give me something to do, and two, tinker with the idea of generating an income stream as a self-employed artist, doing the only thing I can do, which is talk about Doctor Who. So I think this is going out for patrons probably the week that I do it of Christmas. But if you're a non-patron, I don't know. But look, season's greetings whenever and wherever you are. And it may be that this goes out in the middle of July, and I think it's a bonus episode, so maybe hold off till next Christmas. Or I could release it a year later, but that seems, I can't even contemplate that. I'm building up to this Christmas. I can't contemplate next Christmas. But what I do know is I was in the mood for a Christmas episode because, it's a cold, wet afternoon in December, and maybe a year ago. And Ben Pope is such a lovely young comic. I saw him first when he came and did my new stuff night at the Comedy Store, I think, and I found him so charming, and he has such a sort of beguiling and slightly offbeat turn of phrase, and he looks like a sort of young student-y type, but then he's infused with a sort of surrealist, but without being wacky, a kind of charmingly, slightly sort of befuddled offbeatness that I really like. It's like his sort of surrealism is not because he's a strange, crazy guy, but more because he's, a sack of potatoes hit him on the head. But he's a lovely comic. So avail yourself. And I've seen him go from being, the open spot, the new act, the sort of 10-minute guy to somebody who now closes Excess Malarkey, my club. He's a headliner, so he's ascended through the ranks, and rightly so. And I was delighted upon his last visit to discover that he's a bit more than somebody who likes Doctor Who. He's a bit of a fan, and I'm even more delighted to hear from that introduction that it's his first episode of Doctor Who, and he watched it when he was a kid, because there's so much of sort of what I do and what I think about that, and I think discussions we've all had as but between us as we certainly older fans, we love to see young kids sort of beguiled and excited by Doctor Who, and not beguiled is the wrong word. They're enchanted. It's magical. They're bedazzled, and that sort of that unfettered joy that uncynical children have. That's just sort of wide-eyed consumption of the imagination, which I love. Which, for the best will in the world, we can't do as adults. We're soiled by, experience, cynicism, taxation, failure, and we know that. We sort of know that there are people behind the work, and we sort of know who those people. There's nothing as pure as the joy of a child, but I expect that from a child. I don't expect that from somebody I've known as an adult, even though he's younger than me and one of the younger comics, working on the circuit that I would sort of, encounter relatively often. I don't think about him being a child enchanted by Doctor Who because he's an adult. So, but of course he's had that journey, so he still has that. That sort of childish glee is a bit more of a close memory for him than it is, say, for me. Where I suspect a lot of what I remember from my childhood is now made up, because we sort of piece it together through fragments and emotions, don't we, rather than recall. Anyway, what the long and the short? That was the long. The short of it is, a lovely young comic discovered Doctor Who as a teenager, still likes Doctor Who. This is his first episode. It's Christmas. It's the first Christmas. But I'm about to face my first Christmas without a festive Doctor Who special. I know the Chibnall has not had Doctor Who Christmas specials for reasons I'm not sure he managed to articulate satisfactorily for me. But there were at least festive seasons on the less important day of the year that gets less traffic, so is less of a good idea. But anyway, let's this is a least positive Doctor Who podcast. This is the first Doctor Who special when the writer Russell T Davies had a blank. Well, they'd already done sort of Charles Dickens. They'd already done A Christmas Carol to Charles Dickens in The Unquiet Dead, but I suppose that's before they sort of even conceived the idea that a Doctor Who special was a thing. And let's not talk about the Feast of Stephen. That's a different thing. Although we have recently, I think, uncovered a new fact about the Feast of Stephen. I was hoping to do a podcast about that for Christmas Day. It's only an actor fact. It's not particularly exciting, but of course it's exciting for me. Anyway, there's a new fact out there about the Feast of Stephen. But there's now going to be lots of old memories conjured up about the very first Doctor Who Christmas special, when Russell T Davies could do anything, but what he had to do was introduce a new Doctor and make Christmas deadly. So let's see what happens as I'm on iPlayer, and I'm going to press select on the Christmas Invasion in 3, 2, 1. Oh yes, of course, the that return to the pan into the planet Earth from Rose, which is lovely to remind us it's still the same series, and that refrain of music now is so familiar. I am a big fan of Murray Gold. I know some people find there's too much music, and I have sympathy for them, and I know there's some people who think the music tells you what to think a bit too often. I have sympathy for them. However, I think it's so good, and I'm afraid the music that makes me sad gets me every time. I occasionally think maybe this is a comedy scene music is occasionally laid on a bit too often, but maybe that's me giving away just let the actors do the comedy, mate. You don't need to blinky plonky it. I love the fact this is Doctor Who. This is my favourite thing in the world. I love Christmas. My childhood was I allowed myself to be very frightened of life and sad as a child. I'm not asking for sympathy. We were relatively comfortable. It's more about my emotional makeup, I think. But I loved Christmas. Christmas was a time when nobody could be mean to you, nobody could pick on you, nobody could, make you feel unloved. And I remember seeing the make of that, and they had an actual prop, didn't they? That they sort of slightly sailed over from that cutaway where the base of the TARDIS goes over Mickey and Jackie, and so I always loved Christmas because it seemed to me an oasis where your family had to be nice to you, and all the worries would go away even temporarily. Now I know that's psychologically really bad. You should live in the moment, not look forward to particular occasions for happiness. But Doctor Who, my favourite thing. Christmas, amongst my favourite things. A Doctor Who Christmas special. And, of course, the excitement of having this new Doctor, David Tennant, who I'd remembered showing off to my then partner because David Tennant narrated a Doctor Who. There's a Doctor Who. There's Slade. There's Tinsel. There's a Doctor Who. Which is, it's slightly contrived, that, because she knows the Doctor blood, but it allows us a Doctor Who into the opening titles. I'll take it that it's slightly shoehorned in there. David Tennant. And David Tennant had narrated that, the story of Doctor Who to now, or whatever it was, that was shown, I think, the day before Rose. And I remember saying smugly to my then partner, when it said narrated by David Tennant, I went, he's going to be the 10th Doctor. And it was just me being an arse and sort of going, that's the guy from Casanova. Everybody loves him. But I also knew my secret knowledge was he's also a Doctor Who fan, and he's working with Russell T Davies. And then, within weeks, he's the new Doctor Who. It's extraordinary, isn't it? So he was a kind of known quantity, but I think we were quite surprised. I'm not sure he played it how I necessarily expected him to. I remember being quite surprised at how manic, he was on the Children in Need thing. And of course, he's become the definitive. I still think he's definitely the most popular Doctor of the modern era. He's about to. It's another reason for watching this as I'm watching it. He's about to become Doctor Who again. I love Jackie Tyler. I love Camille Kajuri. I think she's the sort of character that does Doctor Who great service because she's almost from another program because of her concerns and her outlook. But Camille Kajuri is an interesting enough actress that she has that. I'm from these programs set on council estates with down-to-earth characters, but she's also interesting and funny enough that she gives it that slightly broader dimension that lends itself well to Doctor Who. So I think Jackie Tyler is a great Russell T Davies stroke of genius. She's because she's funny, he likes her, but she's also he's and what I like about Russell is that he likes people who you might not like in real life. Jackie is selfish. Jackie is thick. Jackie can be very, very thoughtless. And yet he doesn't go, and that's all she is, because she's also empathic. She's also principled. She's also actually very smart in other ways. And when push comes to shove, she's loyal. And she's capable of being hurt. And it was nice to see Penelope Wilton back as Harriet Jones, although I watched Aliens London World War III, and I do think Penelope Wilton's giving a performance in that, and she's not the only one, of what a few people thought Doctor Who would be like. It's slightly bigger, it's slightly more manic, it's slightly, we're doing that sort of kids show thing. And that's not to say that she's bad, because she's great, but I think tonally it's just slightly askew. Love Daniel Evans as Danny Llewellyn, and he's nice because he's not hugely well known, I would say, to the public, but well known within the profession, and now as a great artistic director and Shakespearean director, etc. But he's got heft from the profession, and also he's Welsh, and I think Russell, not just it being made in Cardiff, but having Welsh actors playing characters who aren't there to be Welsh, which really mostly is what happened in a lot of old Doctor Who and in a lot of TV. You had to be a reason for you being Welsh, and I like it. It just gives it a little bit of a flavour of what Doctor Who of this period is. Noel Clarke, I think, has changed the way he performs from early on as well. And I read in interviews at the time where he sort of said, I needed to tone it down a little bit. Interestingly, when I brought that up to Russell, when I interviewed him, and Russell was lovely and so open, but very much erred on the positive. He was there he wasn't going to tell, he wasn't going to give me any dirty, dark secrets. Although he was very honest with me about some things when the mic was switched off. He was very candid and made me feel very safe and comfortable, and he wasn't a difficult interviewer at all. When I said what I thought was a fairly standard observation that Noel Clarke himself had made. I can't call him Noel, I don't know him. Which was I was quite OTT in the first few episodes, and I watched them and I brought it down, and I said that to Russell. Did it take people a while to get used to making Doctor Who to the right tone? He was like, no, he wouldn't have it. Or if he knew that and he thought that, he wasn't going to say it to the likes of me, which I thought was interesting and very professional. But I certainly notice a difference between the two, and it's odd because Russell was very, 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 very friendly and very, very nice, but there was in those sorts of instances there was a barrier, which I think is interesting, which is why he's so good at managing the sort of press. I'm not the press, I'm a lovey with an iPhone, but the whole way the show is presented, because even to me on my sort of fanny podcast, fan-esque, my fanny podcast, is that too if you like, he knew what he was letting me have and what he wasn't letting me have, and what he didn't let me have, there was no unpleasantness, there was no embargo, but he very clever. He's a very smart sort of negotiator without it seeming like it's a negotiation, which is why I think he's another element beyond his show running, casting, writing abilities of why he's very good with the show, because he knows exactly how to get it out there sort of almost pitch perfectly. I've not talked much about it. There's so much to say about this episode as well, and I remember, I'm sure there's a commentary, because these were the days when you got like a commentary on a DVD, a commentary on a Red Button episode, a commentary and a Christmas cracker. It's brave, isn't it, not to have the Doctor doing anything. They rued the fact that they got in the cab and they didn't say where they were going, and I think they'd wanted them to, and they'd had to cut it for time. But it's those things that just go, you're watching a television program, that happens, and they tried to make it happen and it still happened. And it's a lesson there that sometimes when you watch something, you go, why didn't they do that? They probably did, they've probably tried to, but they probably had to make a decision based on something practical like timing or coverage or just getting on with it or whatever, that makes that wants them to need the audience, has them need the audience to go, just give us that, because it's not important, and you kind of know, and if you know that they should really say where they're going in a cab, believe me, we do, because we've kept our BDI on everything from what somebody's coat button was like in the previous shot. So we do know. Give us the benefit of the doubt, and I think we're too keen sometimes to catch out our television makers, our creatives. We know it's a fiction. It's any of the. This is brilliant. I mean, this was in a few of the trailers as well. But Killer Santas, Killer Christmas Tree. It's a very nice effect as well, isn't it? It's a mixture of practical, or is it? It's not just practical, but I like the fact that they have the practical element where it chews up Mickey's chair, it smashes through that coffee table. You actually see some of the physical damage that it's doing. And it's a killer Christmas tree in Doctor Who, which I flipping adore. And doesn't she say, I'm going to get killed by a Christmas tree? Which I think she does perfectly. It's not an easy line, that, and she does it absolutely fantastically, because it's funny, but this is still a potent threat, even though it's a fun Christmas menace, if you like. You are under no illusion. That's just it's made Christmas tree shaped holes in the wall, but it's because you saw it chop that chair up, because you've seen the damage that it does. It's visceral, it's practical, it's dangerous, it's sharp. So I love that sequence. And then there's a load of Santas outside. I mean, isn't that? I mean, my sympathy for Chris Chibnall when he said, I can't think of anything to do. I mean, bad. I can't think of anything to do for Christmas because it's kind of all been done. Russell did have the sort of, I'm doing the first Christmas special, so I'm going to make Santa Claus deadly and a Christmas tree deadly. And you go, well, and you bloomin' would. And I love that. But they're not even. But what's interesting is that they're not the main threat. And they're pilot fish, which is a nice idea, and I like the way it's explained with the shark and all of that. Even though I'm not entirely sure of the logic of it or where they quite fit, but it doesn't really matter to me because it means we've got killer Santa robots and a murderous Christmas tree that are trying to kill the Doctor. And David Tennant's sort of rat-a-tat-tat. He's so good at fast dialogue. It's I need you to shut up. I think she's brilliant. I think that's brilliant. I think that's so funny. Little soup and a ham sandwich. I love Jackie Tyler more and more as the years go by, I have to say. There's an apple in my dressing gown. He gets hungry. And this, of course, just a thing as simple as an apple in a dressing gown speaks to her character. Howard comes around in his dressing gown, explains practically why they've got a man's dressing gown, which is useful practically to have our Doctor Who in a dressing gown. And also, it's useful for the payoff at the end. Nothing is wasted. Some things that seem like a joke actually come in very, very useful. And I totally buy, we need the Doctor incapacitated again. I totally buy that, it'll flick a switch on and he'll wake up to sort of save their lives. And so we get a little sneak peek of the Doctor and then he collapses again. It's a very clever way of having him incapacitated until he needs to rise and shine, in the last third or whatever. But of course, you still want to see the new Doctor Who. So we have a little preview of him there. And now it's back to... Jason Mohammed, I've been on his radio show. He has a show on Radio Wales. And occasionally, as unpaid Doctor Who advisor to the BBC, I get asked to go on shows to pass comment on Doctor Who issues for the BBC. And I've been on Jason's show a couple of times. In fact, I think I might have got £35 the last time I did it, but they paid my agent instead of me. So then they took a cut, even though they didn't line up the job, and they know they didn't. But it's an automatic system, apparently. But anyway, that was a nice bonus because I don't normally get anything. So I don't know how that slipped through the system. £35, I know. So, yes, that's nice. And I like the way, again, it makes no sense, but they have the bit where they're talking about the pilot ship and the shark comes and eats the screen. Makes no sense at all, really, why it should. But you don't question that, and it adds to, it's just a nice little visual. It's very well directed, this. It's a very nicely directed piece of television. It's James Hawes, isn't it, who had directed I think the stand. I love Joe Ahern, but I like that, the way that they do the telly and they all jump. Yeah. She was going to be called Mal Loop for a while, wasn't she? But she's called Trinity Wells, Lachelle Carl. I spoke to her at an American Doctor Who convention, and she was lovely. She's quite hot on sort of equity diversity panels and stuff like that. I thought she was cool and she was really smart, and I liked her. I hope she's back now that Russell is back. Do you think her agent was like, hey, have you seen the news? You might be doing the news again. I love this unit theme from Murray Gold. Daniel Evans, and Chu Omambala is that actor who he was. It's probably too much of a tangent. He was in, I think, King. He's done Shakespeare at the RSC with David Weston, who I sort of know, who's in The Massacre and Warrior's Gate. That's a really boring piece of info. He's an actor who was in a thing with another actor who's been in some other Doctor Who that's totally unrelated. Yes, I Know Who You Are is definitely going to be one of my favourite things. I love that joke. I don't know why. It's a silly joke. I don't really know where it comes from, but it's really funny. And when the Sycorax kill everybody, and then she goes, Harry Jones, Prime Minister, and they go, hub, 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 hub. He translates it of, yes, I know who we know who you are, I think is one of the funniest jokes in the whole of Doctor Who. I love it. I think she's good here, and I think it's novel, is it? Because they'd given her a reference to Blair's Babes in... Is that in Aliens London World War 3? It might be this. I can't listen to every piece of dialogue here because I'm commentating it all. And I think this woman, Anita Bream, she's Icelandic, isn't she? I think she's beautiful. And she was in Journey to the Centre of the Earth with Brendan Fraser. I haven't seen her in much recently. I think Freema Agyeman auditioned for this part. So when she first came into their viewing. Martians are completely different. I like the way he does that. So yeah, they don't they? They set up Penelope Wilton as being quite heroic, having been, a bit of the sort of underdog, and she's become Prime Minister that we like. And she gets lines here saying, tell the American president, which was a cool thing to do in the UK at that time because it was George W. Bush, and the British media were, it's quite a cool thing to be. We don't like him. So it's not an unexpected thing to happen in a program, and it was a sign of her being, I'm standing up to that idiot president. He's about the worst president they're ever going to have, and so that was definitely to set her up as, we think she's pretty blooming cool, which makes the ending of this, all the more of a surprise and a bit, but sort of a kick in the teeth. And that's because Adam Garcia, they made a bit of a big deal. He's a musicals actor, isn't he? I love the way. Also, I love the way the Sycorax look like Queen in the video for Bohemian Rhapsody. And that's good because we have we need the Sycorax not to speak English for various parts of this drama, which is good, but it addresses very cleverly the fact that we can normally understand aliens. It's a TARDIS thing, so we've got a nice little thing to stop the audience asking that pesky question, but it has an emotion, but that purely practical thing has an emotional impact on Rose, and it sets her off into a little bit of spiral, and that sets us all to thinking of how can it be the same person? That gives us a little bit of doubt, which we naturally have about a new Doctor Who because we've got used to the old Doctor. And I remember meeting people who hadn't given a fig about Doctor Who 12 months earlier, who had now got into it, so of course talked to me about it because they knew I was the Doctor Who guy, who were going, well, I don't want to watch it now that Christopher Eccleston's not Doctor Who. So even though he'd not been around that long, he was, to them, that's what they were used to, and they weren't having anything else. And so those misgivings, we don't like change, and yet Doctor Who thrives on change, but it means, and of course we also don't like stuff that gets stuck in a rut and stays the same. So means that Doctor Who, built into its own DNA, has something it has to not only do but actually pull off really well, and then not sort of repeat the way that it does it, not make the change predictable. It's really hard. She's great, Penelope Wilton. She's a very, very good actress. And she's giving it that real, and I like sort of I like all this sort of boardroom stuff, I know that Doctor Who has been brilliant to be successful for, getting it onto council estates, getting it with real people, with people who don't have authority, and it's part of Russell's great ability is to and part of Doctor Who's great appeal is the the juxtaposition of the otherworldly and the very ordinary. But I also like it makes it feel a bit more grown up to me. These people in the higher seats of power having terribly serious conversations, and played by actors giving it serious sort of heft and gravitas. And I like all of this stuff that they do with the translation. That gives it an extra little bit of drama, because we have to go through the translation to get to the truth and all of that. But Penelope Wilton is brilliant at all of this. This is stuff that's being discussed at the highest level, which just makes it seem more important. I know we shouldn't think of politicians as more important than a person in a tower block on a council estate, but I don't know, it just helps to give it the scale that it needs, as well as doing something that's equally important to it, which is saying, but actually the lives of supposedly ordinary people are very special, and we need to feel for them, feel for them when they're in danger, so that if when you're sitting, as one always often, well, I don't know, can't speak for everybody, but as one does, going, oh, Big Ben's got scaffolding on it. That's brilliant attention to detail. Sitting there going, oh God, I'm not very important. Doctor Who sort of goes, yes, you are. Don't be down on yourself. I'm not very special. I never amount to anything. You're amounting to something by being alive and being you and being human and being, quirky and contradictory and silly and fun and brave when you don't know that you can be brave, and resilient when you go through things that you get through. Doctor Who says all of that without saying it, any of it. It kind of says it. Yes, and this is where the sort of plot kicks in. Because I wasn't expecting... I don't know what I was expecting from the Christmas Invasion. I think I was expecting more of the Santa Tree sort of stuff. Actually, yes, this is how good at casting Doctor Who is. That's Paul Anderson, who I think has about 2 lines in this. And he's walking along, done by the light. He's... all right, Tommy Shelby, I am a Peaky Blinder. He's... whichever Shelby he is, he's the older brother Shelby in Peaky Blinders, and he's a psychopathic drunk, and he's a really dodgy character. And I think it's... Now, I might choose... I wish I'd asked Russell about this scene, because I think this actress, Kathy Murphy, who I think was a regular in the House of Elliot, it's a one-scene part, and I think she's flipping brilliant. And the way that she says, what is it, John, help me out here, is a very real piece of phraseology. I think she gets the panic right. I think it's not too histrionic. And I think she really does that. I'm an ordinary person and I don't quite understand what's going on here. And I'm worried, but I'm also not too histrionic because it's also a bit weird and I don't quite know how to react. And she's got, 25 seconds to do it in. You don't even see her face barely, and it's a really good piece of acting. And I wanted to say that to Russell in my interview. I don't know, because it's hard being an actor, and you can, you audition for a thing, you might have to be recalled, you then do it, then loads of it gets cut because very few performances always stay the whole, and then you might not even be seen very clearly. And then when you've done it, actually nothing happens. Nobody goes, I saw you in that thing, I'll employ you in something else immediately. So that moment that Kathy Murphy does just to the street, exhorting her kid and her husband, who are non-speaking artists. Nice close-up for Paul Anderson, but as I say, he's only got a couple of lines. That's brilliant. That's such a spooky Doctor Who thing of having silent people standing doing what? It's really spooky. It's a really good idea. It's really unsettling. And, it's very simple. It's not, although I'm sure hard to achieve, having, I'm sure there's lots of green screen and lots of melding and blah-de-blah-de-blah. But I mean, simple in terms of, it's not a great big spaceship. It's not a laser beam. It's not an explosion. It's all identifiable things. It's landmarks. It's walls. It's the sky. It's people. But the combination of them and what they're doing is hugely Doctor Who because it's disturbing and it's unsettling, using the sort of the most basic of ingredients, if you like. And yes, to finish the Kathy Murphy thought, You know, that's she does a moment of brilliance, which requires great skill and creativity and endeavour. And we have loads of really good actors in this country who are capable of great things, but sometimes they have to do tiny things. And we'd notice if they weren't good, but we don't notice often enough when they are really good. And I think she's brilliant, and I love that. And I love and hate being an actor for those reasons. So we've got the whole blood group thing here. So there's nice bits of sci-fi going on, which is lovely. And and the policeman was Shaul Carlson, who's in who is a Doctor Who fan, he's Narvin, isn't he, in the Gallifreys. I've met him only very briefly a couple of times. He's a nice guy, gets a lot of work as an actor, very good actor. The policeman, I think, is quite a nice part. He gets various nice bits and bobs, and he turns up in a Torchwood, so good for Sean. I think Daniel Evans is a very convincing scientist, and he gives it that kind of. I love the bit he does at the press conference when he sort of goes, "Thank you very much," and sort of shuffles off. He's got a slight sort of. I'm a scientist, but I'm not hugely confident. I'm actually a bit of a sort of nervous sort of chap, but without overplaying it, without overplaying the eccentricity, the lack of confidence. You know, overplaying that it can become a tick and become a bit annoying. I think it's very real and it's very believable. I love this. Interestingly, I love it, and yet. I think this is a very funny joke. They're on the roof. I mean, that's so funny, so well played, such a good line. But I love this because this feels so important. You know, I'm asking you, the Doctor, and suddenly as a Doctor Who fan you're going, my God, the Prime Minister's asking for the Doctor on Christmas Day. Doctor Who's important. I love Doctor Who. It's this is as serious as it gets. But it does slightly take away from the fact that the Doctor is a mysterious person who comes in and nobody quite trusts. But I have to say, when I was younger, I did find all those moments where the Doctor had to spend a whole episode persuading people he wasn't a spy a bit tedious. I wanted him to be able to get on with helping the goodies, not to have to win the goodies over. And I sometimes thought that was a flaw in the format, although it's sometimes a very useful part of the storytelling. So in one part of me goes, but it's quite relieved that everybody knows who the Doctor is. This is Billy Piper is so good. I haven't even mentioned Billy Piper. That's how much we take for granted how good some of the base constituents of this relaunch of Doctor Who were. She is fantastic, and the fact that this is a very real emotional response, instead of going, oh, it's wacky, it's crazy, Doctor Who has changed their face. It's my friend has essentially died, and now there's a he's walking around with a dead man. His clothes are essentially a dead man's skin on this interloper. I mean, I love the crashing windows again. That's the sort of thing I remember it being when it was such a big deal in Remembrance of the Daleks. I think they could either have the crashing windows or another effect, and they had the crashing windows. Whereas now we sort of, the crashing windows are a thing that you can do. But I love the crashing, the gherkin, and all of that. But of course, the wobble, the shockwave that causes the breakages of the buildings. That knocked a couple of people off the ledges as well. But you don't worry about that. This is a beautiful shot. This is a big deal. I wonder where all. I was going to say, I wonder how all these extras are. They all get a lovely close up. I bet they're very happy. I don't want to go down that wormhole because otherwise I'll start trying to track them down. That's a brilliant shot. The London. I mean, again, they've got such an eye for the epic. Independence Day towards that. Get some famous. Well, Doctor Who's done it, hasn't it, with St Paul's and Westminster Bridge, and although often I think the publicity photos of some of those moments are actually better than they are in the episodes, particularly Dalek Invasion of Earth. But they got every landmark in there, and that's epic, that's bold, that's Christmas, that gets you going. The shot of Big Ben in Aliens of London is one of the great Doctor Who kind of, because it's a great big British icon being smashed, and being invoked and being, having stuff done to it within this, this silly programme of ours. and that, that makes Doctor Who seem, like it's making a great big impact. And Doctor Who, can sometimes be a little bit domestic, or a little bit, narrow in its horizons sometimes. And yet, I will accept those who say, the Prime Minister calling for invoking the Doctor, and the Doctor being, the oncoming storm, and this mythical figure, does take away from some of the charm of the Doctor. Of it's, the Doctor is this improvising loner maverick who sort of, saves the universe by mistake, and never quite fits in anywhere. So, and yet, he's been part of the establishment, in the unit days and all of that sort of thing. So, these different versions of what we want and expect the Doctor to be live in our heads, I think. And at the end of the day, we just have to go, it's whether we think it's done well or not. And I think this is done well. So I can live with... so I happily accept it. I not just accept it, I'm not tolerating it. I enjoy it, even though if you asked me what I thought of the Doctor, I would err more on the side of unknown accidental maverick type. And of course, it can paint you into a corner if everybody knows who the Doctor is, and the Doctor is the saviour. And I know the programme's tried to reset itself on occasion, and wipe everybody's memories or whatever, so that nobody knows who the Doctor is, because otherwise, he just keeps arriving as this sort of saviour, and that seems counter to what the programme needs the Doctor to be most of the time. So it's difficult. It's such a difficult juggle. This is really good. And Sean Gilder, what an actor! Totally unrecognisable as the Sycorax leader. I remember when the cast of this came out, I was very excited. Doctor Who was attracting so many interesting names because Sean Gilder's done loads of really good work, really recognisable character actor. And I think he's brilliant in this. And that's such a shocking death. We loved of Danny Llewellyn, and he just got to give the sort of inspiring speech, and then he gets killed as well pretty quickly. That's a bit crueler, but I love all of the sort of facial expressions that Sean Gilder gives between that beautiful sort of mask and is this not just cherishable? Yes, we know who you are. Oh, sorry, Russell T Davies is a brilliant writer of comedy. But that mask, which has the sort of bony exterior and the fleshy interior, which is a kind of perversion of the normal, isn't it? Is the Sycorax look great? And Sycorax is a great name. I remember watching the Tempest at the Ludlow Festival. Sylvester McCoy was in it. Gosh, Sylvester McCoy and Jim McManus, who is ophthalmologist in The Invisible Enemy, who beautifully in his programme notes at the Ludlow Festival one year, not that year, I don't think. No, it was when he'd just done The Invisible Enemy. Said Jim has just fulfilled a lifelong ambition. Achieved a lifelong ambition by appearing in Doctor Who. Then I should interview him, shouldn't I? He's been around a long time. I've seen him on stage since in The Mousetrap. Anyway, let's not talk about Jim McManus. He's nothing to do with this. But Ludlow Festival, The Tempest, Bernard Bresslaw as Prospero, and Caliban was played by Frank Windsor. Oh yes, and so he has scenes with Sylvester McCoy and Jim McManus, Trinculo and Stefano. Oh no, so they all sing Caliban, but then they all talk about, don't they, Sycorax, who's a character not seen but heard of in The Tempest, and it's a great name, the witch Sycorax, isn't it? And so Sycorax is also is already a name that sort of is familiar to us, but in the lexicon, but it's not so. It's not like calling. It's not like calling it your alien leader Monty Don. You'd go, well, that's the gardener and nobody else. But Sycorax, you go, that's the name of that unseen character in Tempest. But it's not so latched onto that one particular thing. So I think that's a good choice of name, and it sounds good as well. The Sycorax. Oh yeah, so this is a nice touch. Of course, they've been brought up to the spaceship. Oh, that's nice. They start to warm towards each other. Yeah, and the tea. And I mean, isn't it perfect that the tea is what revives Doctor Who? That's a brilliant shot as well. That that augmented with the hordes of Sycorax. Like it's like the sort of Sycorax Senate, isn't it? All these, which I'm presuming are, if not CGI'd, sort of, the same handful of extras, relayed several times. But it's an effective visual. And they're real caves, aren't they? So it has that feeling of real, there's something in the air that you wouldn't get in a set, I don't think. And that, yeah, I love how desperate they are without the Doctor. It sort of shows, it shows how important the character is, and it shows that this regeneration thing is not something that's happened lightly. It's not happened glibly. Now, the Doctor's always been a bit, odd, and people have been a bit, I need slightly convincing you're the actual Doctor. But it's more come from, well, I don't quite believe that's happened, rather than my best friend has died and now we are up a certain creek without a paddle. So I think, again, Russell has done the very clever thing of taking a situation that we're quite used to, and wringing the emotional consequences out of it to up the drama. And again, I know some people who are sort of resistant of, the emotional content of modern Doctor Who, but drama is emotion, and I mean, we had it in the 70s. You cared if people died. It's just it has to be a bit more. I think as television has evolved, we've expected such things to be a bit more open, a bit more plausible, a bit more, worn a bit more, a bit more realistically, or perhaps it's a reflection of our society. Maybe we're a more emotional society. It doesn't matter. Bless her. She goes, I think she does that very well. I think that speech is really hard to do, because you can kind of see why Rose is doing it. She's just saying all the things that she's encountered. But I still am not 100% sure I buy it as a thing that she would do. But Billie Piper absolutely judges it perfectly. And when she does the leave this planet in peace, she doesn't do it as a, and I'm actually brave. She does it as a, I'm trying to be brave and I'm failing. It's quite a thankless task poor old Adam Garcia's got as well, basically acting as translation software, but he does it well, and you get lots of lines, but yeah, and this is genius. We've had the whole setup that the translation software isn't working because the Doctor is essentially offline or malfunctioning. And we'd probably stretched it as far as we could with the translation. It was going to be a bit tiresome if that happened all the time, even though it led us to some nice dramatic revelations. And, of course, the brilliant repeat joke of "We Know Who You Are." And now it allows for the hero's entrance of the new Doctor in pyjamas. And then and then we have this absolutely, brilliant entrance of the Doctor. I mean, it does undermine the Sycorax slightly, but that's fine. It's a bit like the anti-plastic and the Auton threat in Rose. The story isn't really about that. Sometimes you need to overcome your alien invasion. So a bit like sometimes you need to find the key to time in the first 5 minutes, because actually that's less interesting than what else we're doing. And we sometimes, I think, have to get over that as Doctor Who fans. Go, no, it's all right to occasionally have a villain that is secondary or that has shortcomings, because that's not actually the story that we're telling. And we need somebody there to occasionally provide a physical threat or whatever. But this is actually about how, Rose realizes that she can cope on her own. They all do, but also, that to establish the new Doctor, which it obviously does a very good job of doing, because he has become the definitive Doctor of the new era. And oh, how young he looks. I mean, he still looks good. He's far too thin. Bless him. He's such a nice man. He is such a nice man, you know. And again, I've only had very, very limited contact, but every occasion I've had to interact with David Tennant has been an absolute pleasure, and he couldn't have been nicer. And he owes me nothing, and yet he's done me 3 or 4 favours off his own bat. And he's not, for no reason other than that he wanted to. So I have a lot of time for David Tennant. It took me a while to warm to his. I was slightly surprised by the Manic Mockney thing. I thought he was going to be more in the mould of a sort of British eccentric. Matt Smith is closer to my idea of what a Doctor Who, certainly a younger Doctor Who performance would be. A slightly sort of eccentric professorial type. And also David Tennant's he's got that, he's got that very expressive sort of clacky teeth, hasn't he? And that whacking great sort of tongue that I love the way he sort of tastes stuff. But he's very sort of, his senses are all quite almost sort of feral, animalistic, but he's funny and he's obtuse, but he's got that sort of attack. He's like a sort of, he's like a, it's almost like a sort of obtuse stoat, isn't he? He's sort of, obtuse stoat Barraboy is the 10th Doctor in a way. Ferret, he sort of ferrets about, doesn't he? Digging himself into trouble, but biting if he needs to. But he's also very good at the comedy, and he's got that great energy and great attack. And I think that's, one of the killers of Doctor Who is that if the dialogue or the expository stuff slows it down, the necessary explanation, gets us sort of mired in boring techno speak. Well, Russell's very good at writing that stuff so that it's interesting and it doesn't take too long and it sounds good. But I think the combination of Russell T Davies and David Tennant delivering that stuff and making it urgent and making it not stick around too long but stop it from being unintelligible and babble, that I think between them they pull off one of the real hardest things of keeping Doctor Who alive. And Tom Baker did it in a different way. Tom Baker was very good at making it all sound very resonant and very serious and like it, it was danger from the dawn of time, and that those space things were deadly serious. Whereas David Tennant, they're like sort of dangerous and vital and bloody. He's a vital Doctor, and I love the way he speaks alien language. He has that other cool bit where he speaks Jadoon, doesn't he? When he goes bo Maho, but the way that he does it there, where he goes, "I'm speaking your language," and he raises his eyebrows if to go, "Yeah, matey," I think is really that's the sign of an actor that's he's thinking about the truth of it even when he's spieling a nonsense alien language. And there's something nice about a sword fight as well. It reminds you of Doctors of old, because the Doctor's always been a bit handy with a sword. And it's a good broadsword fight, this, actually. And I love the fact that Doctor Who is fighting in his pyjamas. That's a very Doctor Who thing, that the new Doctor, saves the Earth in his pyjamas. And I love this piece of music as well. And yeah, the fact that they've established the alien spaceship is sort of flat on the top. So, yeah, we can go out and have a scrap on it. This is great because it means the Doctor's being sort of physical man of action. Oh, nice bit of slow-mo. That Sycorax design really is very good, isn't it? Like a bit of slow-mo. I think this is holding up very well. I do remember, though, at the end of it, going, Yeah. There were things that didn't, there were things that didn't quite work. Because as I say, I expected it more to be, they chop the doctors out. I remember thinking, how are they going to get out of that? Of course, Russell T Davies can get out of anything. But of course, the hand is not wasted. The hand comes back to haunt us. But this makes sense. I totally buy that whilst the regeneration is sort of still ongoing, and that's accounted for in the fact that the Doctor's so unsettled immediately after the regeneration. If anything goes wrong, I totally buy that as a witchcraft Time Lord. Love that. I totally buy that as a possibility. I don't, that's not nonsense to conveniently get us out of a thing. But just the rhythm of the whole thing as well, and that it builds to witchcraft Time Lord is fantastic, and it's a fighting hand. I like that, and I did worry because of course we'd had Cassandra get killed. It was important to me that the Doctor didn't kill, and I was slightly disquieted by the Doctor allowing Cassandra to blow up, and I was like, oh God, do we have a Doctor that kills people now? Although the Doctor has killed and allowed to die in the past, but as I refer you to my earlier answer of we accept the bits that we like or that we think work, and we don't accept those that don't. I generally think the Doctor is somebody that doesn't really kill, but I'm aware that's very much a liberal having my cake and eating it sort of person. But it was important to me. But then, of course, what he does is he sort of states, well, no, and this is the writer as well going, I can't defeat everything by not having the bad guys get killed. So it's kind of going, my predisposition is to be merciful, but don't mess me about. And also it gives David Tennant, who's had to start off being speaking 19 to the dozen, distracting them with nonsense, which is a very Doctor Who-y thing to do. So we also know, that's not going to be what he's like all the time though, because this is a trick. We know that's a kind of Doctor Who-ish conceit, to have that moment of quiet, intense, but don't mess with me. The humour thing, the blabbermouth is as the very best Doctors do with Troughton with his childhood innocence and impish humour, and Baker with his Tom Baker with his sort of obtuse sense of humour. It's all a cover for that phrase I like, quiet danger. This you don't save the universe without being capable of doing bad things. And so even though, and that's a paradox at the heart of the Doctor, of course, and a paradox at the heart of ourselves. We want the world to be a nice place, but would we do nasty things to keep it that way? Well, we probably would. And then you go, well, what do you count as a nice thing? And what nice things do you talk of? Do you allow to be justified to do the nice thing? And that's of course when morality gets complex, which is very interesting. This was a turn I didn't see coming, and I'm not sure I'm happy with it, because we'd had the end of Aliens of London says Harriet Jones goes on to 3 terms and it's a golden age, and you go, okay, so that's an established part of history. Again, I don't worry necessarily about those sorts of things too much. And this does. I mean, Penelope Wilton, I think, is fabulous here. And in the lovely, fluffy Russell T Davies universe, where even awful mothers are actually decent people, worthy of our love and enjoyment. Selfish, people, characters are layered and all that sort of thing. But in this fluffy Doctor Who universe where everything is zesty and joyful and full of adventure and a joie de vivre, there's a dark side. She is so good. I mean, yeah, I think and that smile is heartbreaking because, I think this is a brilliant moment of acting for Penelope Wilton. It sort of wells me up. It gets me. I love that. I love it when actors give, nonsense. It's nonsense. He's talking about blowing up an alien spaceship. They're real, emotional resources, and play it 100% real, and it's to allow. This is a reference to the bombing of the General Belgrano, the ship that was retreating during the Falklands War. It was no longer a threat. Do we? What? Where do you stop? Where do you stop fighting? So it's a kind of dig at Thatcher, which I'm not averse to, because I think Margaret Thatcher's legacy is one that I think still casts still creates still puts the dark colours in a number of the shadows over the society that we have today. But I don't know why it happened to Harriet Jones. I don't know. What does it give the story? I suppose it gives the new Doctor a sort of moral zeal and a kind and it stops the relationship between the Doctor Who and the seat of power in the UK being too comfortable, when we've had that thing that I said was a two-edged sword, the Christmas Day appeal. We don't want Doctors to become too establishment. Well, okay. Let's make that uncomfortable again, because otherwise it'll just be, oh, la-di-da, Doctor Who's had a phone call from the Prime Minister whom he likes again. So, I suppose in the long term that was important. And this is, of course, a lovely trick. And this is also, a bit of satire of that. Don't you think she looks tired? But also, it's the Doctor can defeat you with guile, with the power of words, with something unsettling and intangible. He doesn't have to kill you, which is sort of quite powerful and quite funny and quite satirical and quite smart. But that's so sad, the way that they walk away, because she's done what she thought was the right thing, even though it's ruthless. I'm sorry. So I love the fact that she gets redeemed when she comes back all those years later and gets to do the joke once more before being exterminated. But I remember thinking that this at the time didn't sit easily with me. But then, of course, it's not supposed to sit easily with you. But I do remember thinking there were things about this that didn't quite gel for me. But hang on. I love this song. I love Song for Ted. I love the Doctor Who songs. I'm a sucker for it. I had them played at my wedding. And my then wife didn't mind. Bless her. There was obviously a critical mass, but I love this. I love the song. I love the. I mean, it's just a sort of redress of the TARDIS set, isn't it? And a few nods, like a long scarf and a frilly shirt. But I love it. I love it. I love it. And they don't make a big deal of it, actually, and none of that. Will this one do? Will that one do? No, let's have a Christmas song. And we'll put his clothes on. I always worry he gets too hot in that coat, though. I wouldn't want to wear that hat. He does do that sort of tongue thing quite a lot, doesn't he? He's got a great face, though. I love him. I love David Tennant. And when I revisited the sort of Russell T Davies era, during lockdown, I didn't watch everything. I didn't watch this. I haven't watched this for ages. I love this episode. I realised just how much we took for granted David Tennant and Billy Piper, who are so effing good, and Russell T Davies. I love it all. I love seeing Doctor Who with a Christmas cracker hat on. It makes me quite emotional. I don't know why. Because I love Doctor Who and I love Christmas. Christmas makes me happy and sad. Doctor Who makes me happy and sad, and I think that Doctor Who makes me cheerful and frightened. I think that's the brilliance of it. It's Doctor Who is daft and very serious. It's two extreme things that shouldn't coexist, somehow managing to coexist together, that makes Doctor Who, punch all my buttons. And it does make me quite emotional, I think, because it's tied in with childhood and stuff like that. And there's Paul Anderson there. He's got his Christmas jumper on. I think he had one line, but it's quite nice that he gets to come back and do another another bit of filming. Although I know from having done bits of telly where you go, well, I've had my dialogue scene and they want me to come back to sort of dance around in the background. Oh dear, especially if that's another day. So really? I mean, I did something recently where I had to do it on the Monday and on the Friday. It's like, well, if it had been 2 days in a row, I'd have been all right. But Monday and I've got to make that. And on the Friday, I did very close to F all. And that's when you go, but hang on, Toby, you wanted a job and you like acting, and now you're going, yeah, but I mean, and I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning just to be a part of it. And now I sort of go, well, I don't really want to get a train journey to be a long shot. I love the continued joke of the snow not being actual snow. Those little things that you didn't know were going to become sort of continued jokes. And I love the fact that Jackie Tyler is the one that's kind of onto the Doctor. I think that's really smart. I love that whole dynamic. But I love seeing Doctor Who at Christmas. And as I say, I did after this think, okay, well, that was the first one and that was hard to do. And, I'm sure, they'll iron out the creases. And the next Doctor Who Christmas special will be amazing. I actually think this might be my favourite. And I think, of course, any misgivings I had about it were purely to do with it being Doctor Who in the present and me always worrying about the things that don't quite I've had this conversation before about I need to learn to enjoy what I'm in rather than worry about what's gone before or be terrified of what's to come. It's a lesson to us all that enjoy it while it's here. And I mean, I'm glad that this is still here. I'm glad we can still watch this. I love that. And I love the fact it's got the snow and Santa and Christmas trees. And I remember how exciting this was, this trailer for the various different... You saw Sarah Jane Smith. God, and I love that episode. The Cat Nuns are amazing. Giles from Buffy, K9, and they do the bullets can't stop it, don't they? Which makes you think he's talking about a Cyberman, but he's not. I remember being really surprised that was actually in the werewolf episode because he thought it was about the Cyberman. Love that. I know that David Tennant asked for it to be the Doctor and not Doctor Who, and I am cross with David Tennant for that because I actually quite like the fact that the credits refer to Doctor Who as Doctor Who. I refer to Doctor Who as Doctor Who for fun. I don't think Doctor Who is called Doctor Who, but I like calling Doctor Who Doctor Who. But I think it adds a layer of mystery if it's only ever the Doctor. You're referred to as the Doctor. Shouldn't be referred to as Doctor Who in the episodes, but is referred to as Doctor Who in the titles. I like that mixture and that delineation. This version is more correct, I'm sure. And also I think it's because it was an introduction, because John Nathan Turner introduced it, didn't he, for the Davison era, of changing it from Doctor Who to the Doctor. And so because it was a change that happened during my lifetime, I don't like it because anything that happened when I was around is nothing like as good as what happened before I was around. Open that one up, Dr. Freud. And so, yeah, I prefer it to be Doctor Who, David Tennant, rather than the Doctor. But David Tennant is also a Doctor Who fan and has perhaps achieved more in the world of Doctor Who than I have. So who am I to argue? Right. So what are my 5 favourites? I loved that. I really enjoyed watching that. I love that confluence of Doctor Who and Christmas. So my 5 favourite things. Well, one of them's got to be the killer Christmas tree. I mean, that is just so good. It's a brilliant sequence. It's a brilliant idea. Just all of the sort of Christmas icons becoming deadly is what we want, isn't it? That's what we want from a Christmas special. And that sequence is so well done. And as I say, the fact that it makes Christmas tree-shaped holes in the walls and it chews up Mickey's chair and all of that. And it's got Jackie's, I'm going to be killed by a Christmas tree. I think they showed that on... was was it Totally Doctor Who or something else? I had it on video as well. I'd watched that sequence quite a few times because it was on a preview of something. I was still VHSing Doctor Who at this point. I hadn't got a recordable DVD player. I didn't get one of those until the next season. The next season? No, the season after. I see, I'm so behind the times. Anyway, I shall be watching. I shall be watching a film by those new people, the Lumiere brothers, next. So yeah, my favourite thing, one of my 5 favourite things, is the killer tree, Christmas tree effect and sequence and just idea, and the fact that it's there. Okay, so that's the obvious one. I mean, I sort of include in that all of the whole, it's Doctor Who at Christmas. I don't think we can have that as a separate thing. I love seeing him in the paper hat. I love Slade being in it. He's basically gone, right, everything Christmas. So number two, I think number 2 has to be the joke. I love the joke of, I don't know why, because it's not based on anything. It doesn't hark back to anything. It's its own little thing, but it totally works, of Harriet Jones telling everybody who she is, which sort of goes back to when she was, like, MP of Flydale North, but now she's doing it as Prime Minister, and it's a bit sort of Cub Scout sort of thing, and whatever she goes, I'm Arkela or whatever. It just reminds me of that, somebody in a village hall, but she's Prime Minister, and it's a lovely gag, and everybody plays it so beautifully. But it's funny anyway, but it's really funny when the Sycorax do it, and that's helped by the translation software, because they say, and then you kind of know what's coming, and it wouldn't work so well. I mean, it would still be funny, but then of course we do get an alien saying it in her last episode when she comes back, and the Daleks do it before they kill her. So I mean, that's the beauty. You've got this brilliant joke just before the very brave sort of death of Harriet Jones that that is her moment of recompense for what she does in this episode. But it's such a lovely joke, and everybody does it so very well. And I think the bit where the Sycorax do it is I think it's one of the funniest moments in the whole of Doctor Who. I blooming love it. So yes, Harriet Jones, we know who you are. Yes, please. Then what do we have? I mean, I'm tempted to say, I need to try and win this, I think. I'm tempted to say Kathy Murphy doing that just very real piece of acting as the mum, the unnamed mum, we don't even know her name, with, it's talking to 2 people whose names, who are non-speaking extras. Because I like to champion, the unusual. But I don't think I'll go to, because I think I need... I don't know. I think I need to see what... But that's the sort of thing I would choose. I don't think it's the sort of thing that Ben would choose. And it's certainly not the sort of thing I think that would necessarily have hit him when he was a 12, 13-year-old watching this. I've got to have an eye on that. Because why not try and win? It's Christmas. Even if it's not where you are. But I love the cup of tea. I love the tea. I love... I think James Hawes' direction is absolutely fantastic. I love the sort of alien invasion sort of Independence Day, loads of landmarks, shadow of the spaceship, the shattering glass. I love the shattering glass. I remember seeing the shattering glass on the trailer, or was it on the trailer, or was it on a show beforehand? Love all of that. But of course it's the new Doctor as well. We've got a new Doctor who comes out in I love the Sycorax. I think they look fantastic. I think Sean Gilder gives a really good performance. Especially as he's talking nonsense for most of it, but he invests it in a real sort of alien alien sort of vibe, and he's got this great, and he does a lot with his face. And I was really pleased when he was announced that he was going to be, when it was announced he was going to be in it, because he'd been one of those actors that's been around, sort of giving a real sort of dirty energy to everything. And I don't mean that pejoratively. He's a very realistic sort of character actor. He's not unlike William Simons, actually, a sort of slightly sort of pockmarked, real looking but still striking looking, but and makes it seem like he's just being, but actually there's a lot of technique to that kind of acting that makes stuff seem and look and be real. And I remember being excited that he was cast, because I remember he'd been in a few of the sort of day-to-day Alan Partridge type things, doing sort of comedy characters. I think he's a policeman in one of them. And he was in a couple of episodes, maybe only one episode part, but a couple of episodes of State of Play, where he was a character that you invested in, even though he'd only got a very short amount of screen time. And I'd always sort of noticed him and stuff. And I think he became a regular in Shameless just after this, which was lovely to see. It's always nice when somebody who's been sort of part of the furniture then becomes the centerpiece, as it were. So I was really excited to see him cast this, and then of course you don't actually see his face. But he's very good, and you have to be. I think you have to be good to be, to do those parts well. But everyone thinks, well, yeah, I'm just watching the alien. You often don't think of the actor behind the mask, which is of course the point. But it's a shame for the actor. And I love Daniel Evans's performance as Danny Llewellyn. I love that press conference he does. It's just full of little bits. He says, "Doesn't he do this? That's it. That's what we're doing," or something. Whatever it is he says, and then when things go on, he sort of absents himself from the press conference. It's just full of tiny little sort of nervous little bits of nervous energy that I think are really nicely observed pieces of characterization. Love all of that. But Penelope Wilton's performance I really like. And do I choose the calling the Doctor, because I like that. It makes Doctor Who seem important. It really ups the stakes, even though I know it compromises the format, and they have to do something to address that. Otherwise, it's just, hello, Doctor, la-di-da, it's the Prime Minister here. Come and get us out of the trouble, which you don't want. But that's what the Belgrano thing at the end, I suppose, resets, gets us out of. And the Sycorax, they do. Well, no, yes, because I like the joke, and the joke that is allowed to land even better because of the translation software. That translation software. Oh, and also kudos to the planting of the apple, the Satsuma, that gives us that bit. But no, it's got to be, because all of that cleverness comes together when the translation software stops working, because you've just got to the point where you've probably had enough of it, and it means that the actor can start speaking in English. So Sean Gilder is freed to give a performance that is not, just spouting noises. But kudos to David Tennant for the way that he does his line of Sycoraxic. But and it points to that, the TARDIS does translation software. So don't ask that question, audience at home. But it actually, instead of going, and we're going to brush it under the carpet, it goes, no, we're going to claim it. And we're actually going to go, yeah, this thing that has been invoked to just stop the audience asking questions and make it easier for ourselves as dramatists, I'm going to actually use it as part of the drama and go, suddenly they're speaking English, which means that the Doctor is no longer malfunctioning or offline or unconscious, because the reason it had not been working was because the Doctor wasn't working. But now that it is working, that means, oh my God, it's the Doctor. Oh, the doors have opened and the Doctor is there in his pajamas. And then that facilitates the big sort of hero's entrance and the announcement of the 10th Doctor, or at least a post-regenerative version of him. That is all of Russell T Davies's skill as a dramatist coming together in a way that makes sense of some of the science fiction elements of the storytelling, and in a way that actually helps all of his actors, because good writers actually like actors and give them things to do, or are conscious of the bits that will get the best work out of them, or whatever. And I think you always get that with Russell T Davies's stuff, which is why even the smallest parts in a lot of his things are actually parts worth turning up for. Which brings me back to Kathy Murphy, but I don't think Ben will choose that. And I think there's part of me that wants to go, and it's important to give the underdog their due. Kathy Murphy won't give a monkeys. There's not going to be somewhere where she's sitting there going, oh, well, at least I got I was one of the point system in an obscure science fiction podcast done by somebody I'd never heard of. But there's part of me that sort of says, no, but I need to address the justice. It's why we write reviews of things, isn't it? Because I need to acknowledge that thing that nobody's acknowledged is good is good, or to bring that thing that everybody says is good down to earth a bit. I'm not saying it's a virtuous thing to do, and I wish I hadn't done some of the reviews I've done in the past where I've maybe been too quick to go, oh, and I don't like that piece that person's done. I'll show you, and you go, why the keenness to do that, Toby? And I'm keen not to do that anymore. I've turned a corner. That's not to say, I don't, people on forums and all that sort of thing, free to discuss their television in any way that they want. Of course they are. But I see that drive to sort of, bring people to account is not one that I need to have as somebody that myself produces stuff and creates stuff and should maybe, be a bit more, understanding and celebratory of other people's endeavour. But I do have that inclination to sort of also go, that thing, that performance that nobody noticed, celebrate that little undersung, moment, piece of nuance, talent, performer, whatever. But as I say, it's not going to make a difference to Kathy Murphy, who I hope is very happy and has been working, and I say has done some very good telly. But me choosing it's not going to make any difference to her, even though I feel it's nice to celebrate. That and go, because there are no small parts, but actually there are small parts, and most actors would rather be playing the bigger ones. So I'm sorry, the fairy tale version of acting, that is, there are small parts. They're not as much fun to play as the big ones. So that's why we should even thank even more when good actors turn up to do the small ones and do them well. But I think I'm sometimes in danger of overlooking, because I like looking and celebrating the underdog, because perhaps that's what I identify with, the base constituents. And it was the rewatch I did of a lot of these episodes during lockdown, where you went, God, we were so lucky to have Russell T Davies. And it seems mad now, and I was like, oh, and those days are gone. And then, ping, 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 Russell T Davies is coming back to Doctor Who. I was like, and I'd just kind of gone, oh, God, we didn't appreciate that when we had it. If only we had that now. Oh, how bizarre. And David Tennant is one of the leading actors of his generation. By boy, we are lucky to have him. But Billie Piper, I think in this particular episode, I'm going to choose Billie Piper, because actually without her, that early series wouldn't have had the impact that it had. And this episode, because the Doctor isn't in it for so long, necessarily so, and it's a great way, and I think the way they see the Doctor in is perfect and is brilliantly done in the Christmas Invasion. But you can only do that if you've got really good work being done by your other lead, and that's Billie Piper, and the emotion that she brings, and that emotion that she brings that says, so regeneration isn't just a sort of science fiction flourish thing. It's also, it's not a way of just keeping the show and maintaining a different act, getting a different actor in because the lead actor can't do it anymore or doesn't want to or whatever. It's going, this isn't just a, what I'm going to have to, here we go. It's actually, my friend has died and I've got to get used to this interloper in his clothes and in his vehicle kind of thing. And she does that very, very well. And it means that amongst all the sort of silliness and frivolity and the, let's go crazy with this and have killer Santas, you've got real emotional believability at its core, which anchors you and which allows you, that gives you the bit that you identify with, the truth of the emotion, which then allows you to be more accepting of the outlandish. And that is really hard to pitch and judge and do well. And I think this era of Doctor Who does it more than well. I think it does it exceptionally. And I think Billie Piper, because she's gone on to stardom, is too easy to take for granted sometimes. And that episode knows what it's got in her, and it uses that. And so if she wasn't there, it would be a different episode. So I think I have to say Billie Piper, because she's so good. And then she does that wonderful speech, which I think is hard, and it's not my favourite bit of writing of it, actually, where she invokes all of the Shadow Proclamation and the Daleks and all of that. But she totally makes it work. So good. So Billie Piper. So what have I done? I've got one more to go. Yeah, and So what about there's the tea. There's the Sycorax. There's the alien. I do like the Independence Day vibe. I do like an Earth invasion, a straightforward Earth invasion, and I love I love all the newscasting that makes it seem real. All of that, Orson Wellesian kind of stuff, if you like. Um, but the bit that gets me. Oh, and the Song for 10. I love the Song for 10. I love that changing scene. The economy of that, but the fun little nods and in jokes, and the fact that it's rather sweet, and the fact that it's a song in Doctor Who. Not really had that, a song in Doctor Who, and now a Doctor Who song is a thing. I love a Doctor Who song. And I love that song in particular. Don't know why, I just love it. But the bit that sort of gets my throat wobbling and my eyes brimming is Penelope Wilton at the end, and I think it's because it's a bit I didn't really like the first time around, and I didn't quite know, and maybe that's the point. Maybe you're not supposed to like it. You're not supposed to sit in it because it points to a complicated morality. Because actually, she has a point. The Doctor is not always there. She's not being a baddie. And there's a moral case to be made for going, these people came and tried to attack us. All right, they were sent away by this benevolent alien, but they were aggressors. And, so there is a reasonable point that she makes. But of course, in the Doctor Who universe, it is a baddie thing to do because we tend to try and err on the side of not blowing up things that are different from us and trying to find the peaceful solution, even though often the show has its cake and eats it, or doesn't eat it, but blows it up, but from a safe distance, and goes, well, I didn't directly kill it myself, so that's somehow more palatable. But I think the ambiguity here is absolutely deliberate. And of course it stops the show becoming cozy because you don't want that government hotline to Doctor Who. But it also shows what the Doctor is capable of with words. I love the fact that he does it just with words and not actions, and the way they turn their back on her. And yet, because of the brilliance of Penelope Wilton's performance, because I could have used her, because I could have invoked her as my number 5 because I love the speech where she calls for the Doctor and where she goes, oh, they're on the roof, and I love all of that as well. But again, I've talked about the duality of where that's wonderful, but also it poses us some difficulties in terms of the format of the program. But yeah, I think the Belgrano bit, because I think it's probably the best piece of acting in the whole thing, in a very well acted thing, and because I think it's bold and I think it's brave, and because as I say, because I didn't really like it at first, but maybe that's the point, and I really love it now. And it makes me feel uneasy, and it makes you feel in two minds about the character, and it's Russell T Davies upsetting the apple cart from what he'd actually set up himself. I think it's brave. I think it's interesting. And also, it's sort of got a slight satirical intent to it, which, I also think is very interesting and thought-provoking. So yeah, I think the betrayal of Harriet Jones is my number 5. So, Killer Christmas Tree / all Christmassy things. The Yes, We Know You Are joke. The translation software giving way to English, giving way to the Doctor, and that hero speech. Billy Piper and the betrayal of Harriet Jones. They are my 5 things. What has my lovely guest, charming boy that he is, I feel like such an old soldier, Ben Pope, what's he going to say?
There's literally so much, like the pilot fish, the bit with like tea infusing the Doctor with like the resuscitation energy that he needs, the sort of the big red button, the bit where he quotes the Lion King. There's literally so much, but these are the 5 things, my favorite bits of this episode. Firstly and foremost, the most indelible image from this entire episode, obviously, the spinning Christmas tree. There's no getting around it. It's like perfect RTV era Who, in that it is so camp and silly, and yet somehow they still made it quite threatening. I don't know how they managed to do it, because it's obviously the silliest thing imaginable. Um, but somehow, with the mixture of like the score and the script and the design, it still feels every time I see an artificial Christmas tree, it's impossible not to think of the spinning Christmas tree.
Yes. So I got it. Spinning Christmas tree. I forgot. I haven't even mentioned the Lion King. I love the Lion King joke. I mean, again, it's a duality because there's things I like that I also that make me go, oh, I'm not sure because it's not Doctor Who as I see it. But that's of course how it was. Is that I prefer it when Doctor Who quotes Shakespeare and great literature and becomes a gateway to great works of the past, because then it's doing something Reithian and laudable. And of course it seems somehow special that Doctor Who likes popular culture from the 1800s because that's in the past. Although of course there's no such thing as the past when you're Doctor Who, because it's in ours, because I'm that self-loathing thing that I've referred to. The idea that Doctor might like EastEnders and The Lion King, I'm sort of like, no, that's too parochial. That's too of now. He should be loftier than that. But actually, if it facilitates a lovely joke and also get over yourself, Toby, it's great. And I do like The Lion King bit. It's very funny. Okay, Ben's number 2.
Number 2 was possibly, this is a bit of a grace note in the episode, but the bit where the montage where David Tennant chooses his new wardrobe, obviously a huge moment for like the sort of silhouette that he'll cast over the coming years. But I always found it incredible that it was this one of the very few glimpses you get of the rest of the inside of the TARDIS. You see that sort of incredible huge spiral staircase. And having only just been introduced as a watcher of the time, I'd only just been introduced to the idea of the TARDIS being bigger on the inside. This sort of the tiny little moment where you get to see that there is untold infinite depth to it it was so magical. It's something, really an incredible piece of design.
Oh, so I nearly chose that little. I didn't think he'd choose that because it's such a small moment. And I'm more about the song, but I do like the way that scene is done, because it's got some of the elements of previous scenes of that kind, and it's our first Doctor choosing their costume scene in New Who. Oh yeah, I love it. And I love the way they just sort of do it, and a montage, because we never really had that many montages in old Doctor Who, but it's a thing you can do now. It's an easier thing to do, and it's a more modern telly thing to do. So part of me wishes I'd chosen that. I concur with Ben's choice, even though I didn't choose it.
Some other stuff I loved. The moment, I think this is incredible writing. The moment just before David Tennant arrives for his first proper savior moment as the Doctor, the big montage, the big monologue. Just before that, there's an incredible, almost sort of horror trope turn in the plot, in that throughout the whole episode you've been unable to understand the Sycorax. You've been unable to understand their speech because the Doctor has been recovering and he's a crucial part of the circuit of the TARDIS, so Rose hasn't been able to understand them. And there is a moment in what the Sycorax leader thinks is his triumphant conquering speech where they all suddenly realize he's speaking in English, and there's the series of logical steps you go back to realizing that means the Doctor is alive, and the camera sweeps through to the TARDIS doors opening, and there he is. It's I am a 29-year-old man. I know how this stuff is written and it still gives me goosebumps. That's very special.
Yes, it's two. He's done 3 things, and 2 of them have been the same as mine. So it's 2-1 to me currently. Oh, I've only got to get one more, and I am a Christmas winner. And I love that Ben is a 29-year-old man who gets goosebumps, because I'm a 48-year-old man who gets goosebumps, and I think that's what it's all about. I'm quite emotional watching this. I don't know why. I think because I love Christmas, because I love Doctor Who, but it ties in with so much of one's life, and and because it's so trivial and so silly, and yet it's capable of such joy. I find that really sort of moving and profound. And isn't that a great evocation, a great demonstration of why creativity is so important? Because actually it means nothing, but all it does, and yet what it can do, it can make us feel happiness, sadness, whatever, more profoundly than actual things in real life, or sometimes can make us sharply focus or give us perspective on things that really do matter, that are real, or equally take us away from things. Or they can just be a cathartic way of accessing our emotions that perhaps we've been shutting off or not had access to because of the vicissitudes of life and the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Yeah, I think it's really, so, let's not get away from this. Doctor Who is silly and fun and desperately unimportant. But I think one of the things about being human is that silly, fun and unimportant things are, in a way, crucially the most important things of all. Right, but not as important as me winning this. So, go on, choose another thing. Choose one of the things I chose, Ben. Choose one of the things I chose.
And then two smaller things to finish that I loved. The moment at the end of the episode where the snow falls. Obviously, quite a kind of amusing fake snow, almost like a meta comment on the fact that obviously it's fake snow because it never snows in Britain, and it would particularly never snow for someone someone to be able to film a scene. But the idea that the snow, this beautiful magical thing, is in fact the burnt ash of the spaceship that's been destroyed in the atmosphere, is like a perfect sort of sci-fi, sort of slightly kind of bitter note. I love that, the idea that something beautiful and sweet that people are enjoying and is bringing like joy to the community actually is this like horrific sort of fatal moment for someone else within the ecosystem. That's it sort of kind of summarizes how I feel about good sci-fi in general, but particularly Who is this quite sort of elegant conceptual ideas.
Oh, Ben, I mean, you deserve a point for that point. Eloquently made, brilliantly put. I mean, I enjoy the snow scene, and particularly because that becomes a running gag. But yes, that idea that this beautiful piece of Christmas imagery that we associate with rosy cheeks and the bite in the air and that sort of comforting, the strange paradoxical thing that something bitterly cold and that turns wet and slightly uncomfortable is so sort of evocative and beautiful and comforting and charming to us. But then in Doctor Who they add an extra layer and go, yes, and isn't it perfect because a white Christmas is a romantic thing, and it is deconstructed, and it is the burnt cinders of laser blasted aliens, is a very, and obviously the meta stuff that Ben talked about as well comes into play there. Very good observation, beautifully put. I don't know why I just tried to say it then again in different ways, but because I wanted to acknowledge that I think that's a really good choice, and very nicely done by Ben. Shows what a good mind he has. Yeah, I'm happy to concede that point. Nonetheless, I can still win this if Ben now chooses one of the things I chose, which, if you're keeping score, is the repeated joke of, yes, we know who you are. It's Billie Piper's performance, and it's Harriet Jones's betrayal. As I just said all of those out loud, I'm not sure he's going to choose one of those things. I think he might choose the Robot Santas, or Paul Anderson's jumper, or maybe the shattering shards, or the image of the people. That's another one I could have chosen, the image of the people on the ledges, which is so good. If he chooses Kathy Murphy, I'm going to kill everyone at Christmas. He might choose the Harriet Jones joke. Let's see. I'm on the edge of my building ledge.
And finally, my fifth thing, is you get the first in this episode. You get the first mention of Torchwood, and again, as a 13-year-old watching this, I couldn't believe that serial TV making like this with these little hidden references to things that you were gonna find out about later. I hadn't seen the Christopher Eccleston series, so I didn't know about Bad Wolf at this point, and the way that this sort of secret society of people who are investigating in a sort of Men in Black way, alien tech and that kind of thing. I couldn't get over. I thought it was such a bit, perhaps something that got overdone with later episodes of New Who, of having something that this one word that keeps getting mentioned over again. They did it again in the next series with Mr. Saxon, and over again with the crack when Moffat got in charge. But I think at this point it was still a sort of underused trick, and I remember turning, as this episode finished, turning to my parents and saying, "What does Torchwood mean?" And they were like, "We don't know either." And I was like, we have to watch the next series. So there you go. Those are my 5 favorite things from this absolutely classic, iconic episode.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, I was talking. I didn't even acknowledge the Torchwood bit, but that did seem very exciting at the time. And of course, that we were going to get this expanded universe. Oh, hope we get one of those again soon. We got Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures, and they were all good. I mean, Doctor Who was everywhere. What a time to be alive. What a time to be 12 or 13. And I love the fact he was watching it with his parents. Oh, Ben, you could be my son. But yeah, that's a good choice, the mention of Torchwood, because it did give it an extra little bit of a frisson. Still not as good as the Harriet Jones joke, though. Call yourself a comedian. But yes, I nearly did an appropriate Christmas thing, which was Escape to Victory, but I didn't. I've remained in failure. Oh well, at least I'm consistent. So okay, well, good choices, Ben. He's a lovely boy and an excellent comic. And I'm sorry that the backup video of this ran out halfway through. I've noticed, because I didn't plug the phone in. So when this goes on YouTube, it will only be half a video. Apologies for that. Doesn't make a difference to you audio listeners, who will now hear Ben sign off and plug his various wares.
If anyone wants to follow things that I do, I have tickets available for lots of fringe shows that I'm doing over the course of the summer. I'm at the Bristol Comedy Festival, the Brighton Fringe, the Camden Fringe. So you can find all of those things on my Instagram, which is @PopesBenedict, or my Twitter, which is @BenWPope. You can also follow my mailing list, which has lots of fun bits of prose writing and also reminders when I'm doing stuff. And that's that's a Substack page called LO, L-O, exclamation mark. So you can find me there. Otherwise, thanks very much. Keep watching. Bye.
Well, unfortunately for Ben, who I think didn't realise quite how long it sometimes takes me to get round to doing these things, he's lucky he recorded this since a great many people who are still in the to-do archive. That Edinburgh Fringe show and Camden Fringe and all of those have been and gone by the time I've recorded this, and definitely by the time they've gone twice probably by the time I've released this. But those socials are still relevant, so pop in and see Ben and see what he's doing now, probably riding on the success of those things he was, that when he recorded that were in the future. That's the great thing about time travel. You visit somebody when they haven't even done a thing that, when I'm now looking at them, anticipating it, it is now a happy and successful memory. So it's a great leveler, isn't it? I mean, and I remember when the Christmas Invasion was all bold and new, and David Tennant was a new Doctor, and it was all exciting and uncertain, and is it going to be any good? And and of course we know now that this was just the beginning of a golden period for Doctor Who, in terms of how popular it was, in terms of standing with the general public, in terms of what it generated, in terms of toy shops and the public conversation and spin-offs. And, it was a great time to be a Doctor Who fan. And as I record this, really weirdly, we're anticipating the return of a number of the ingredients that made that so successful, and yet, in new forms. And of course, they're not just going to do the same as what they did then. So there's still that level of uncertainty, but we know that the things that we were uncertain about at this period, went on to flourish and work. And we know what became of everybody. And it seemed like we'd closed that chapter and now we're opening it again. So Doctor Who is in a constant state of, regeneration, reevaluation, flux, and that's what Christmas is, isn't it? Really, it's a time to take stock and look at what you've maybe had over the course of the year that you will never have again, which is, I think, why I'm so obsessed with the dead and obituaries, and that's something I've got to be doing as well as doing this, is putting my annual obituary show together, and Doctor Who in memoriam that I do, because I get quite reflective about those things. But it's also about putting a marker on, the end of one year and the beginning of the next and moving forward. So that's, I think, why Christmas is such a profound thing. It's a sort of, it's a stock take, but also, a renavigation, if you like, and not just practically, but emotionally and in terms of, personal interactions and stuff. And in fact, my marriage kind of ended at pretty much at the sort of New Year time, because I think things come to a head, don't they? And if people aren't happy, they go, well, we'll try it Christmas, and then you reveal that actually Christmas doesn't paper over any cracks. And if you want to get rid of that boring nearly 40-year-old man who watches too much Doctor Who and needs to learn how to be happier, now is the time to do it. So it's a funny time, isn't it, of mixed emotion. But I find all of that quite moving. I get moved by all of that, and also excited. And like Doctor Who, Christmas makes me hold the hand of the child that I was, because I they're profound feelings that you remember, of the joy, so much joy and excitement of Christmas, unfettered by life. And remembering that child who was excited and uncynical and, had it all to come, didn't realise that some aspects of life could be so good, and didn't realise that some aspects of life could be grinding and difficult and practical, and sometimes boring, But I find that really interesting, because children are so sort of innocent and enthusiastic and unspoilt, and, real hubs of sort of creative energy, because they're not held back by any of the things that hold us back as grown-ups. And I think that's quite profound, that when we leave childhood behind, part of us dies in a way, and we can only keep that alive by keeping in touch with that kid who has essentially gone, although actually resides within us. I remember a shrink saying to me once, there's a sad little boy still inside you. That's why you do some of the things that you do. And I think that's really interesting. And I want that sad kid to be okay. But also I remember, how excitable and how thrilling and how awe-inspiring sort of life and creativity and things and films and TV, and particularly finding out stuff about Doctor Who was. And I never want to lose that. And you do when you're a grown-up. You do lose that unless you try and keep in touch with that kid. And that's why I think Doctor Who is so special, because it keeps us in touch with that child that we were, that we can no longer be. And it would be daft. We wouldn't be able to do anything. We wouldn't run the world. Life would be wrong if we were like that. But I think to keep some of the essence of that part of us is important. And Doctor Who keeps us in touch with that part of us. I wasn't a kid when the Christmas Invasion was on, but I remember watching it. And so it takes me back to that time where so many things in my life were different. But Ben was a kid, and now he's a grown-up. And I love the fact that through Ben, there's a conduit to me, to his younger self, who watched that with a different kind of awe and excitement than I did, even though I watched it with awe and excitement when I was a grown-up. But it was a kind of different kind, and yet it was still tied in with my own childhood. And God, imagine if I'd seen this when I was a kid and how excited I would have been. But Ben did see it when he was a sort of kid. And so I think all of that is really interesting, and it points to Doctor Who's worth, and I think it points to why we like it so much, why I think, I do try and make a bit of space and time at Christmas to, even though I've still got loads of work to do and I don't finish for a few days, and I really want to get that out of the way so I can sort of clear the decks and actually enjoy Christmas. And that's why I love Christmas, and that's why I'm looking forward to Doctor Who being part of Christmas again, and why I felt the need to maybe do this episode on the year that Doctor Who won't be around at Christmas time. But hey, it's this time next year, I'll be looking forward to another Doctor Who Christmas special. And I think that's fantastic. Thank you for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Ben Pope, who is on Twitter at BenWPope and on Instagram at PopesBenedict. So follow him in both of those places. I'm indebted to him and to the patrons who make this podcast possible. And season's greetings to them, including Steve Manfred, Mark Cockram, Mr. Withit, Neil Oliver, not that one, I don't think, Lisa Andrew, Ian Morgan, Nev Fountain, David Crew, Martin Cook, Catherine Armitage, Richard Patey, John Handcock, William Hames, Richard Thomas, Jonathan Appleton, Matthew Simpson, Graham Slate, Matthew Speddings, Stephen Moffat, not that one, Peter Burns, Peter Harness, that one, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Richard Straw, Neil Tate and Nick Tedstone. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. And if you would like to become a patron and get your name mentioned in the credits of this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where for as little as £3 a month, you can join that illustrious bevy. Get your name read out, get advanced releases. They'll have listened to this a lot earlier than you. Bonus materials, exclusives, as well as monthly AMAs, your very own podcast, Far Too Much Information, and at certain tiers, there's also badges available. But most things are available at the lowest tier, which is £3 a month, and you get a 10% discount on that and any other tier if you sign up for a year in one go. There are 3 releases a week at least for patrons, and that doesn't include pictures of my dog, which you get every Tuesday just because. And I think the dog actually might be more popular than me, so I might have to up his billing. Now, I know that times are tough and a monthly commitment can be really annoying, so you could go to Ko-fi every time you're feeling flush or I say something you particularly like, and buy me a virtual coffee at any denomination you choose at kofi.com/Toby Hadoke. But again, I know times are tough. It's getting colder. Food's getting more expensive. I think we're all in for a tough 2-3 years. I mean, except those people who are already absolutely loaded, who it seems to me are being helped to remain that way. But the rest of us, we're all lumbered. So I'm happy just to be in your ears, providing a distraction and hopefully, I don't know, a little bit of community. I don't know, whatever it is, this is. If you like it, I'm really glad and I'm grateful to you for listening, and please just continue to do that. But what costs nothing is to go to iTunes, to Spotify, to all the places that you get podcasts, and to give these 5-star reviews. They really help with the algorithms. They make these more noticeable. They make people more aware of them, and the more aware people are, the more people listen, and the more sort of worthwhile it is for me to do. Don't make a chump of me. It's worth me doing this at 23 minutes past midnight on the lead up to Christmas, when I got an obituary to write, a script deadline, lines to learn, and the small matter of Christmas to sort out. So, but you know, I wouldn't have it any other way. I enjoy doing these. I've done you nearly 2 hours on the Christmas invasion. What the hell is wrong with me? So yes, please, just go everywhere you can. 5-star reviews and some lines of review as well, which entice people, give people an idea of what this is and what you like about it, if there are things you like about it, and I hope there are. These podcasts also have their own Twitter feed at Hadoke Podcasts, and I'm on Twitter, where I also post non-podcast related stuff at Toby Hadoke. And maybe, if you like all of this stuff, you could come to my comedy club that's got nothing to do with Doctor Who. It's called Excess Malarkey. It's every Tuesday in Manchester. It's pretty much like the rest of my stuff. It's run with enthusiasm, love, and whatever it is that my verbal diarrhea stems from, and is, very accessible. It's runs on a non-profit making basis. I think members pay £3, non-members £6, and in recent years, acts like Russell Kane, Joe Lycett, Sophie Willan, as well as acts from the circuit who you might not have heard of, who are absolutely brilliant, as well as developing acts who are getting there or already brilliant or soon blooming well will be. And it's every Tuesday at 8 p.m. at the Breadshed in Manchester. I'd love it if you could come along. I mean, I do occasionally, quite often, mention Doctor Who, but I like to think I'm more than a one-trick pony, although sometimes I worry that I haven't even got a trick. But anyway, come to my comedy club, and that's at XS Malarkey on Twitter. I'd be grateful. I think you might have had plenty long enough to not need some sort of protracted post-credits indulgence. So all I will say is and this, I'm going to now prove one of the advantages of being a patron, because if you're listening to this in August or whatever, it's going to seem very, very odd, like a turkey and cranberry sandwich and boots in September, which very much gets my goat. I would just like to say, and incidentally, happy Christmas to all of you at home. Is it a Merry Christmas? No, it's a Happy Christmas. I like to think I know my Doctor Who. And incidentally, a Happy Christmas to all of you at home, which I will now pretend was an ad-lib and never planned, and left in the programme, but for what reason? Let's just start a myth that's unsubstantiated and not true, as if anyone is going to mythologise whatever this is. Anyway, la-di-da-di-da, a Merry Christmas to all of you at home. And seriously, I mean, even if you are listening to this at some other time of the year, I'm all loved up for Christmas. You might not be. That's the way of things now. And but where I am, it's all relative, and I'm relatively close to Christmas. I'm a week away, and I can almost taste the blue cheese and smell the pine, none of which I can actually do right now, but I'm hoping to very soon. And I hope wherever you are, you're having a peaceful, prosperous time. And as I said, in the plug for the Patreon, things are going to get a little bit grotty, I think, in the next few years. I don't think any miracles are going to happen to the worldwide economy, or the state of the schisms that seem to be exacerbated by various culture wars, etc. So that's just a reminder that sometimes nice, stupid, silly television programs can take us away from all of that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be taken away from all of that. Sometimes it's called escapism for a reason. Sometimes we need to escape, and I'm very much like, if you'd escape with me sometimes, because it's kind of nice to have somebody to help you over the wall, innit? All right, take